Ilara Voss stared out of the small shuttle window as the stars stretched past in long, silver streaks. She had crossed half the galaxy to reach this colony, a place so remote that most humans called it the edge of everything. The colony was small, barely more than a collection of domes and prefabricated buildings set against the red dust of a barren planet. She had arrived here as a mail-order bride, promised a new life and a chance to start over, but the journey had left her feeling hollow. The shuttle's landing bay hissed and shivered as it touched down on the colony's metal platform. The hum of engines died away, leaving only the faint wind that carried dust across the barren plain. Ilara took a deep breath and stood, her suitcase in one hand, her nerves in the other. She was ready, or at least, she told herself she was. The colony greeted her with polite nods and quiet murmurs. The residents were human, like her. But they were wary. Life here was harsh, survival came before friendship, and newcomers often struggled to find their place. As she walked through the narrow paths between domes, Ilara felt eyes following her. Curious but distant. No one called out her name. No one smiled warmly. She stopped at the largest dome, the settlement's central hub, where supplies and messages were exchanged. A few colonists were busy repairing damaged panels and checking equipment. One of them, a tall man with sun-leathered skin and a wide-brimmed hat, glanced at her and gave a curt nod. "New arrival?" he asked. His voice was low, careful. "Yes," Ilara replied softly. "Ilara Voss." He nodded again and walked away. That was it. No welcome party, no warm reception. Just a quiet nod, and she was left alone with her suitcase in the dusty corridor. Ilara felt a familiar wave of loneliness wash over her. She had dreamed of adventure, of love, of being wanted. Instead, she felt invisible. The colony seemed to hum with purpose without her, moving like a clockwork machine that didn't need her presence. She tried to remind herself that she had a role to play, that she had been chosen for a reason, but the emptiness in her chest made her doubt everything. Her assigned living quarters were in a small dome at the far end of the colony. The interior was plain but functional. A bed, a small table, a shelf for her few belongings, and a window that looked out over the barren landscape. Ilara set her suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "How did I even get here?" she whispered to herself. "Am I really meant to be here?" The wind outside picked up, rattling the dome. She shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. Somewhere out there, beyond the settlement, the planet stretched endlessly, empty and silent. For a moment, she wished she had never left Earth, that she had stayed where people knew her name and smiled when she walked into a room. But then, as the sun began to dip behind the distant ridges, a small movement caught her eye. From her window, she saw a shadow flit across the dusty plain. She blinked. It was a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, stumbling across the ground in ragged clothes. The child's face was hidden beneath a hood, but she could see the small figure struggling against the wind. Ilara's heart tightened. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The loneliness, the fear, the doubts, they all fell away, replaced by a sharp, clear impulse. She had to help. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside, the wind cutting against her cheeks. "Hey!" she called, her voice trembling but firm. "Are you okay?" The child froze, then bolted across the dust, heading for the dome. Ilara ran after her, careful not to trip on the uneven ground. When they reached the dome, Ilara caught her gently by the arm. The girl was shivering violently, her small hands clutching something to her chest, a tattered doll missing one eye. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Ilara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's dangerous." The girl's eyes were wide, scared, and untrusting. She shook her head and hugged her doll tighter. Ilara knelt down, meeting her gaze. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly. "My name is Ilara. Can I help you?" The girl's lips quivered. "Mara," she whispered. I'm hungry." Ilara's stomach tightened. She reached into her bag and pulled out a ration pack she had brought for herself. "Here," she said, offering it. "You can have this." Mara hesitated, then slowly took the pack, her small fingers trembling. She tore it open and took a bite, eyes still wary. Ilara watched her, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. She had come to this colony believing she was unwanted, that she would be invisible, and yet here was a small child trusting her, needing her. Over the next hour, Ilara guided Mara into the dome, wrapping her in a spare blanket and sitting beside her as she ate. Mara's small hands were sticky with crumbs, and her eyes sparkled faintly in the dim light. Ilara realized she was smiling, something she hadn't done since the shuttle ride. "You know," Ilara said gently, "you don't have to be alone. You can stay here with me tonight." Mara looked up at her, eyes wide, and nodded slightly. "Really?" "Yes," Ilara replied. "Really." For the first time since she arrived, Ilara felt a warmth she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the warmth of the blanket or the dim glow of the dome, it was the warmth of being needed, of being wanted, even if by just one small, fragile person. That night, Ilara lay awake on the edge of her bed, listening to Mara's soft breathing. Outside, the planet howled with wind and dust, indifferent to human lives, but inside the small dome, a fragile connection had been formed. Ilara thought of the stars beyond the shuttle windows, the endless emptiness of the frontier, and yet she felt a spark of hope. She whispered into the dark, almost as if saying it to herself. Maybe I am meant to be here." And for the first time since leaving Earth, Ilara felt the tiniest flicker of purpose. The colony outside continued its quiet, efficient hum. Life was hard. The frontier was unforgiving, and she knew tomorrow would bring more challenges. But tonight, she had discovered something precious. A human connection. Fragile, but real. That reminded her that even in the vast emptiness of space, humans could care for each other. Ilara closed her eyes, holding the quiet weight of responsibility and hope. Mara stirred slightly, murmuring something she didn't understand. Ilara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. Tomorrow, the frontier would test them both. But tonight, they were not alone. The next morning, the red sun rose slowly over the barren plains, casting long shadows across the colony. The wind still whispered across the dunes, but inside the dome, warmth and light filled the small space where Ilara and Mara slept. Mara was awake before dawn, her small body tucked under the blanket, staring at the faint glow of the dome lights. Ilara, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, watched her. There was something about the little girl, fragile yet stubborn, that made her heart ache and swell at the same time. She moved quietly, not wanting to startle Mara, and sat on the edge of the bed. "Good morning," Ilara said softly. Mara blinked slowly and murmured, "Morning." Ilara smiled. "Did you sleep well?" Mara shrugged, hugging her ragged doll to her chest. I guess," Ilara nodded. "We're safe here. Nothing can hurt you while you're with me." For a moment, the words seemed strange, almost unbelievable. Mara had survived alone for weeks, scavenging scraps and hiding from dangers Ilara didn't yet understand. But the trust she was beginning to place in Ilara was real, delicate, and growing. After a quick breakfast of rations and water, Ilara and Mara stepped outside. The colony had begun to wake. Adults moved efficiently, repairing equipment, checking the solar panels, and preparing for the day's tasks. Mara clung to Ilara's hand, tiny and fragile against the rough grip of the world outside. "Stay close," Ilara whispered. Mara nodded, glancing around with wide, cautious eyes. The colony had a strange rhythm, almost mechanical in its precision. Everyone knew their job, and everyone moved with a purpose, but there was something lonely in it. A sense that life here was survival first, connection second. Ilara understood that more deeply than she liked. She had arrived expecting to be wanted, to feel at home. Instead, she felt like an outsider. As they walked through the narrow paths between domes, Mara suddenly stopped. She pointed to a small structure half hidden behind a larger dome. It was a tiny shelter, barely more than a tent reinforced with scrap metal. From inside, a soft sound emerged, a child's cry. Ilara's heart clenched. "Come on," she said gently. "We should see if they need help." Mara hesitated but then nodded. The two of them approached the shelter carefully. Inside, a boy about 7 years old huddled in the corner, shivering, his small frame shaking. His clothes were torn, and he had clearly been living alone for some time. Ilara knelt down, speaking softly. "Hello. My name is Ilara. And this is Mara. Are you okay?" The boy's eyes were wide and fearful. I'm fine," he whispered. "You don't look fine," Ilara said gently. "Do you have anything to eat?" The boy shook his head. Ilara reached into her bag and offered a portion of rations. Mara helped, handing the boy the pack. He took it cautiously, tears brimming in his eyes. As the boy ate, Ilara realized that this colony, while populated by humans, had many children like Mara and him abandoned, struggling. Invisible, something inside her stirred. A fierce protective instinct she had never known. She wanted to shield them, to care for them, to give them the warmth and safety she had finally discovered in Mara. After the boy had eaten, Ilara spoke to Mara. "We can't leave him alone. He needs someone." Mara's eyes lit up. Can we help him?" Ilara nodded. "Yes. We can help. We just have to be careful." The three of them moved back toward Ilara's dome. It was tight, but it could provide temporary shelter. Mara held the boy's hand as they walked, and Ilara felt a strange pride and happiness swell in her chest. She was no longer just surviving, she was starting to matter. Inside the dome, Ilara set up a small area with blankets and pillows. She gave the boy water and more rations, speaking gently to him. Slowly, he began to relax, the fear in his eyes softening. Mara watched, fascinated. "Mom," she whispered suddenly, almost shyly. Ilara froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. The word felt heavy, almost sacred, yet natural. "Yes?" Ilara asked, keeping her voice soft. Will you be my mom?" Mara's voice was quiet, almost unsure, but the question hung in the air like a fragile promise. Ilara's throat tightened. She had not expected this, not so soon. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight she had never known. She reached out, taking Mara's small hand in her own. "Yes," she whispered. "I will be your mom." Mara's face lit up with a smile so bright it seemed to chase away the dullness of the dome. She ran to Ilara and hugged her tightly, and Ilara felt a surge of warmth she had never experienced. She realized, in that moment, that being wanted, being needed, was more powerful than any distant promise or dream she had ever held. The day passed in quiet companionship. Mara and Ilara talked, played with scraps of toys and old equipment, and slowly began to bond with the boy, whose name was Yoren. By evening, the dome felt fuller, warmer, and alive with the laughter and chatter of children who had been silent too long. Ilara reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. She had believed she was unwanted, a burden on a world that didn't know her. And yet, in the heart of this lonely colony, she had found purpose. She was a protector, a nurturer, a mother in the truest sense of the word, not because of obligation, but because of choice, care, and courage. As night fell, the wind outside grew stronger, rattling the dome and sweeping dust across the barren landscape. Ilara tucked Mara and Joran into blankets, checking that they were warm and safe. The children fell asleep quickly, exhausted but comforted by the newfound security. Ilara sat by the small window, staring out at the harsh, alien world. She thought of the shuttle ride, the journey across light years, the loneliness she had carried like a shadow. And now, she had found connection, human warmth in the emptiness of space. A faint knock at the dome's entrance startled her. She rose carefully and opened the door to find Lara, an older colonist, standing there with a small, skeptical smile. Lara had been observing Alara's interactions with the children from a distance. "You're doing good work," Lara said quietly. "Most newcomers wouldn't care about those kids. They'd look the other way." Alara felt a flush of pride and relief. "Thank you," she said softly. I can't leave them alone." Lara nodded. "Neither can I. They need someone, and it's rare to find a heart willing to try. Keep it up." After Lara left, Alara closed the door and sat back down by the window. She looked at Mara and Joran, sleeping peacefully, and felt something swell inside her chest. It was love, yes, but also purpose, and a sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She whispered into the quiet of the dome, almost to herself, "Tomorrow, we'll be stronger. We'll face whatever comes, and I'll be here. For both of you." Outside, the colony hummed with quiet life. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and iron, harsh and unwelcoming. But inside the dome, warmth and light filled the space. In the middle of the vast, empty frontier, Alara had found something precious. Human connection. Fragile, but unbreakable. For the first time in her life, she felt truly wanted, and she knew, deep in her heart, that nothing could take that away. The colony had grown quieter in the early morning hours, the red sun barely peeking over the jagged ridges of the barren planet. Alara woke to the soft sound of Mara's laughter. She opened her eyes to see the little girl and Joran playing with scraps of metal and wires, pretending they were small robots. Their giggles were a balm against the harshness outside, and for a moment, Alara allowed herself to believe that life here might not be so lonely after all. But the frontier was unforgiving. Even as the children played, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath the domes. Alara leapt to her feet, her heart racing. Outside, the colony was alive with activity as the tremor rippled through the settlement. "Everyone, stay inside," she shouted, her voice steady but urgent. "Keep the children safe." She grabbed Mara and Joran, holding them close as the tremor passed. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling of the dome, but thankfully, the structure held. The children clung to her, eyes wide with fear, and Alara hugged them tightly. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're safe. Nothing can hurt us here." But Alara knew the truth. The frontier was always dangerous. Meteors, storms, and equipment failures were part of life here, and survival required quick thinking, courage, and teamwork. She had seen the tremor's effects outside. Panels on some of the domes were damaged, and the colony's life support systems were under strain. Alara knew she couldn't just stay inside. She had to act. She instructed Mara to stay with the children in the dome while she stepped outside to inspect the damage. The wind was strong, carrying red dust that stung her eyes and made her hair cling to her face. She squinted against the storm and moved carefully toward the damaged life support dome. Inside, the hum of machinery was irregular, faltering. Warning lights blinked, signaling low pressure and a drop in power. Ilara's mind raced. If the system failed completely, the colony could be in danger within hours. She had learned some basics during her brief training on Earth, but this was real, and mistakes could cost lives. Taking a deep breath, she examined the panels. A connector had snapped, wires exposed and sparking. She rolled up her sleeves and began to work, her fingers steady despite the dust and fear gnawing at her chest. She guided herself with calm precision, following instructions from the control panel and improvising when necessary. Hours passed. Alara worked tirelessly, hands blackened with dust and grease, sweat running down her forehead. She patched wires, stabilized pressure valves, and rerouted power to critical systems. Outside, the tremors subsided, but the wind remained a constant, biting presence. Inside her dome, Mara and the other children waited, anxious but trusting. Mara had tried to stay busy, tidying the small space, but her small hands betrayed her worry. She peeked out occasionally, eyes searching for Alara, and whispered, "Mom, are you okay?" Alara heard the faint voice and smiled through the strain. "I'm okay, Mara. Everything will be fine. I promise. By late afternoon, the life support dome stabilized. The warning lights faded, and the hum of machinery returned to its normal rhythm. Elara stepped back, brushing dust and sweat from her face, and allowed herself a deep breath of relief. The colony was safe for now. Exhausted but determined, she returned to her own dome. Mara ran to her, throwing her arms around Elara's waist. Joran followed, holding her hand tightly. "You did it!" Mara exclaimed. "You saved everyone." Elara hugged them both, her heart full. "We did it," she corrected. "All of us, together." The rest of the day passed with quiet celebration. Other colonists began to check on the children, bringing extra rations and offering small smiles. Elara realized that her actions had earned respect, not through words, but through deeds. She was no longer just the newcomer, the outsider. She had proven herself capable, caring, and indispensable. As night fell, the children slept soundly, finally feeling safe. Elara sat by the window, looking out at the alien landscape. She thought of the shuttle ride, the lonely arrival, and the fear she had carried in her heart. Now, she had something stronger than fear: connection, purpose, and love. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She opened it to find Lara, the older colonist, standing in the shadows. Her expression was serious, but kind. "You handled the crisis well," Lara said. "Most adults would have panicked. You stayed calm and focused. That saved lives today." Elara nodded, still catching her breath. I couldn't leave them alone. The children." Lara smiled faintly. "Exactly. That's what makes a human here. We survive not just because of tools or machines, but because we care. You care. And that's why you are needed." Elara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had believed she was unwanted, that she had no place here. But now, through her actions, she realized she had earned a role. She was more than a newcomer. She was a protector, a mother, a vital part of the colony. The wind howled outside, stronger now, carrying dust and debris. But inside the dome, warmth lingered. Mara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something incomprehensible. Elara leaned over, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "I'm here. Always." On here, the next morning, the colony began to recover from the tremor. Repairs were underway, and colonists worked together with renewed determination. Elara helped organize tasks, showing the children how to be safe and teaching them small skills that could help in emergencies. Mara and Joran followed her closely, eager to learn, their trust in her growing with every passing hour. As they worked, Elara observed something remarkable. The children, who had been shy and fearful, began to speak up. They laughed, asked questions, and even helped with small tasks. Mara's confidence grew daily, her trust in Elara unshakable, and Elara, in turn, felt her own confidence bloom. She could survive this frontier. She could care for these children. She could make a difference. One evening, as the red sun dipped below the horizon, casting the planet in a deep, crimson glow, Elara stood at the edge of the dome and looked out across the barren landscape. The wind was quieter now, the tremors gone, and yet, she felt a deep awareness. Life here would always be challenging. Meteors could strike without warning. Systems could fail. And the loneliness of space could return at any moment, but she was ready. She had Mara and Joran, the children who had entrusted her with their lives and hearts. She had a purpose greater than herself, and she had proven that humans could thrive, even in the harshest conditions, through courage, care, and determination. Elara turned back to the dome, where the children were preparing for bed. She tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "Sleep well. Tomorrow, we face the frontier together." And as she watched them close their eyes, breathing softly in the safety of their small home. She knew, truly knew, that she was no longer unwanted. She was needed. She was part of something bigger than herself. She was family. Outside, the colony hummed with quiet life. The wind carried dust, and the faint scent of metal and earth, harsh and unwelcoming. But inside, warmth, safety, and love flourished. Ilara sat back by the window, watching the stars shimmer in the vast, black sky. She had arrived on this lonely frontier, believing she had no place. Now, she understood the truth. The frontier didn't need her to be perfect. It needed her to care, to act, and to love. And that was enough. The colony had begun to settle into a fragile rhythm after the tremors. Dust storms still swept across the barren plains, and life remained harsh. But inside the domes, warmth and laughter had returned. Ilara had spent countless hours with Mara and Joran, teaching them small survival skills, sharing stories of Earth, and showing them how to fix minor problems around the settlement. The little dome that had once been a temporary refuge had transformed into a home. Blankets, small toys, and scattered tools filled the space, and Ilara found herself smiling more often than she had since her arrival. Mara's trust in her had grown, and even Joran, initially shy and wary, now sought her guidance with every task. One morning, as Ilara helped Mara fix a broken water filtration unit, Lara approached with a thoughtful look. "Ilara," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "you've done more than anyone expected. The children, they look up to you. You've become their family." Ilara paused, her hands dirty with dust and water. "Family?" she repeated softly. "But I'm not really theirs. I'm just someone who showed up." Lara shook her head. "Family isn't only about birth. It's about care, guidance, and love. You've given them that. That makes you family." Ilara felt warmth spread through her chest. The words were simple, but they carried truth. For the first time, she saw herself not as an outsider, but as someone indispensable to the colony and to these children. As the days passed, more children began seeking her guidance. A small group of 3 younger siblings, abandoned after a supply transport accident, timidly approached her one afternoon. Ilara welcomed them, showing them warmth and care, giving each a small ration and a blanket. Mara watched quietly, pride in her eyes. "Mom, can we keep helping them too?" she asked softly. Ilara smiled. "Of course, Mara. Helping is what family does." The colony began to notice. Other colonists, initially wary of Ilara, began to ask for her guidance in caring for the younger children, in organizing tasks, and even in repairing essential equipment. Her presence had become a stabilizing force. She worked tirelessly, balancing duties, teaching, and nurturing, but she never complained. Every small smile from a child, every laugh in the dome, was a reward greater than any comfort she could have imagined. One evening, after a long day of work, Ilara stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The sky above was a canvas of stars, brilliant and endless. She felt a hand slip into hers. Mara looked up at her, eyes shining with admiration. "Mom," she said softly, "the children, they really like you. And I love you." Created. Mom first. Created part. Created for E. 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 Ilara knelt down, holding Mara close. "I love you too, Mara, and I'll always be here for you." Joran came over, hesitantly at first, then hugged Ilara as well. I like having you around," he mumbled. "You make things safe." Ilara's heart swelled. She had dreamed of being wanted, of making a difference, and now, in this remote corner of space, she had found it. The children weren't just reliant on her, they trusted her, depended on her, and loved her. Weeks turned into months, and the little dome became a bustling hub of activity. The children learned to work together, following Ilara's guidance. Mara and Joran became little leaders themselves, helping younger children with small tasks and learning the responsibilities of survival on the frontier. One afternoon, a sudden alert rang across the colony. A meteor storm was approaching, far larger than any before. The settlers scrambled to reinforce the domes and secure equipment. Panic rippled through the colony, but Ilara remained calm. She gathered Mara, Joran, and the other children, instructing them to stay in the central dome, where life support was most secure. "Stay together," she instructed. "I will keep you safe. I, 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 I will keep you safe." The wind began to howl, carrying red dust that stung exposed skin. Meteors struck in the distance, small explosions shaking the ground. Inside the dome, the children huddled together, trusting Ilara completely. Ilara moved from child to child, calming fears, distributing blankets, and checking the dome's structural integrity. Her hands were steady, her mind focused. Every child under her care was safe because she remained calm, thoughtful, and determined. She realized then that her purpose had expanded beyond simple care. She was a leader, a protector, a central figure in the survival of the colony's youngest members. When the storm passed, the colony emerged, shaken but unharmed. The domes had held, and the children had remained safe under Ilara's guidance. Other colonists approached her, admiration evident in their faces. "You did well," Lara said, her voice warm. "The children and the colony owe you more than you realize." Ilara smiled softly. "We all did it together. The children helped too. They're stronger than anyone thinks." That night, Ilara tucked the children into blankets, her hands lingering on Mara's hair as she whispered, "We are a family. Now, together, we can survive anything." Mara hugged her tightly. "Yes, Mom, together." Joran, quiet but firm, added, "Thank you, Mom." Ilara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had started as a newcomer, a stranger, someone who believed she was unwanted. Now, she was the heart of a family, the center of warmth and safety in a harsh, unforgiving frontier. She realized that the frontier had not only tested her skills and courage, but it had also given her something far more valuable: love, purpose, and belonging. Days turned into weeks, and life began to normalize. Ilara continued teaching the children skills that would help them survive. Identifying safe water sources, basic repairs on domes, and even simple first aid. She organized small lessons and games, ensuring that learning was also fun. The children thrived, and with them, Ilara thrived too. One evening, as she watched Mara and Joran play with the younger children, Ilara reflected on her journey. She had crossed galaxies, faced loneliness, and endured fear. But she had also found connection, purpose, and a family of her own making. She knelt beside Mara, brushing dust from her hair. "Do you know why I'm happy?" she asked softly. Mara shook her head. "Because we are a family," Ilara said. "We care for each other. We help each other. That makes us strong. That makes us human." Mara's eyes shone with understanding. "I want to help too, Mom," Ilara smiled. "And you will. Every day, in every way, you will help." That's what families do. The colony around them remained a harsh place. But inside the small dome, warmth and laughter filled the air. The children had learned to trust, to care, and to love. And Ilara had learned that family was not just about blood, but about choice, courage, and the willingness to protect those you care about. As night fell, the red sky deepened, stars sparkling above. Ilara stood by the window, looking out at the vast, lonely plains. She felt a deep sense of peace. She had arrived believing she was unwanted. Now, she was wanted. She was needed. She was family. And for the first time, she truly believed that she could face anything the frontier threw at her because she was not alone. The colony had come alive with activity in the weeks after the storm. The dust had settled, the domes were repaired, and the settlers moved with a quiet determination. Life on this harsh planet was still difficult. Resources were scarce, storms were frequent, and isolation was constant. But within the domes, warmth, laughter, and hope flourished. Ilara had become more than a newcomer. She was now a leader, a guide, a mother figure, and the heart of the children's small community. Mara and Joran followed her every step of the way, their trust and admiration evident in every glance, every word, every small hand clasped in hers. One morning, as the twin suns of the planet rose and painted the red plains in gold and orange, Ilara gathered the children in the central dome. The younger ones sat cross-legged on blankets, while the older children stood behind them, listening attentively. "Today," Ilara began, "we are going to learn something very important. Not just how to survive, but how to thrive." The children looked at her with wide eyes. They had survived hunger, fear, and loneliness, but thriving was something new. Ilara smiled softly, seeing the hope shining in their faces. "Thrive means we help each other. We care for each other. And we grow stronger together. Every one of you has a part to play. Every one of you is important." Mara's hand shot up. "Even me, Mom? Especially you," Ilara said, ruffling her hair. "You help set the example for everyone else. And together, we can face anything." Joran, standing a little taller now, nodded seriously. "We will help. We will be strong." Ilara felt a deep swell of pride. The children had grown so much in such a short time. Their laughter was more confident, their movements steadier, their voices stronger. The frontier had tested them. But under her care, they were not only surviving, they were thriving. As the day progressed, Ilara moved between the domes, checking on the children and teaching them practical skills. She showed them how to repair solar panels, purify water, and reinforce their shelters against the harsh winds. She encouraged them to work together, to share knowledge, and to support each other. By mid-afternoon, a supply shuttle from a nearby colony arrived, bringing much-needed rations and equipment. The settlers gathered to unload crates, and Ilara noticed the older colonists watching her with newfound respect. They no longer saw her as just a newcomer, they saw her as a vital part of the community. Lara approached, smiling warmly. "Ilara, the colony owes you more than words can say. You've done more than care for the children, you've brought hope, structure, and purpose. You've reminded everyone what it means to be human." Ilara shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I only did what I could. The children gave me purpose. They taught me how important it is to care." "Then you've taught all of us," Lara said quietly. That evening, after the supplies were stored and the children settled, Ilara walked outside with Mara and Joran. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky with brilliant reds and purples. Dust swirled gently across the plains, but for the first time, the vast, barren landscape felt less threatening. "Mom," Mara said softly, taking her hand, "I think the children like having a family here. I think they feel safe because of you." Ilara knelt down to her eye level. "Yes, Mara. And that is because we care for each other. A family is not only made by blood, it's made by love, trust, and action. We are all family here." Joran stepped forward, his small chest puffed with pride. "I'm proud of our family, Mom. I'm proud of what we're building." Ilara's heart swelled. She had crossed galaxies expecting to be unwanted, to feel lost and invisible. Instead, she had become a central figure in the lives of many children, guiding them, protecting them, and helping them grow. In the days that followed, the colony continued to stabilize. Children learned to help with small repairs. Older colonists began mentoring younger ones, and Ilara organized weekly lessons and activities to keep everyone engaged. The little dome had expanded into a community center of sorts, where the children gathered to learn, play, and share stories. One afternoon, Mara approached Ilara with a small notebook clutched in her hands. "Mom, I want to show you something," she said shyly. Alara took the notebook and opened it. Inside were drawings of the colony, the children, and even Alara herself, smiling and guiding them. Mara had labeled each figure with names, and at the center of one page was a drawing of a heart, with Alara's name written inside. Alara's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Mara tightly. That night, as the children slept, Alara sat by the window, looking out at the stars. She thought of her journey from a lonely shuttle ride across the galaxy to a fearful arrival, to finding her purpose and building a family. She realized that human resilience, compassion, and ingenuity had carried her through. Humans were capable of thriving in even the harshest environments, not because of technology alone, but because of care, courage, and connection. The next morning, a new challenge arrived. A minor quake shook the colony, threatening the weaker structures on the outskirts. Alara immediately organized a team, including older children who had learned basic repair skills under her guidance. Together, they reinforced the damaged domes and secured supplies. The quake was minor, but the response demonstrated the strength and unity of the colony. "You did it, Mom," Mara said afterward, her eyes shining with admiration. "We all worked together because of you." Alara knelt to hug her. "No, Mara. You did it. You all did it. I just showed you how to help each other." By the time the twin suns set that evening, the colony had grown not just in skill, but in spirit. The children were confident, the settlers were united, and Alara had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and humanity's capacity for care. Weeks passed, and life on the frontier continued. Challenging but now infused with joy, love, and connection. The children grew stronger, learning to take responsibility and care for one another. Alara's role as mother, mentor, and protector had solidified. She was no longer an outsider, no longer a newcomer. She was the heart of the colony, the anchor that held everyone together. One quiet evening, as the wind swept across the plains and dust swirled like golden sand in the fading light, Mara climbed onto Alara's lap. "Mom, do you think humans can survive anywhere? Even here?" Alara hugged her close. "Yes, Mara. Humans can survive anywhere, as long as we care for each other, as long as we protect one another, and as long as we never give up. That is the strength of humanity." Mara smiled, resting her head on Alara's shoulder. Joran came over and joined them, and for a moment, the three of them sat quietly, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. Alara realized that this was the true triumph of humanity. Not the technology, not the tools, not even the courage alone, but the connections we build, the care we show, and the love we share. And in this small, remote colony on the edge of the galaxy, humanity had triumphed. The frontier was still harsh, the planet still unforgiving, but Alara had found her purpose. She had built a family, nurtured hope, and proven that even in the vast emptiness of space, humans could thrive through care, courage, and connection. Mara looked up at her, eyes shining. "Mom, we're going to be okay, right?" Alara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, Mara. We are going to be more than okay. We're going to thrive. Together." Outside, the twin suns had set, leaving a sky full of stars, endless and bright. Inside the dome, warmth, safety, and love flourished. And for Alara, Mara, Joran, and the children of the colony, the future was no longer uncertain. It was bright, full of promise, and built on the unshakable foundation of humanity, hope, care, and connection. The story of a mail-order bride, a little girl, and a small frontier colony had reached its peak, and in the hearts of all those who lived there, one truth remained clear. Humanity, when united by love and courage, could thrive anywhere, even on the edge of the galaxy.